Are you ready for another adventure? Have you ever wanted to step back in time and uncover the secrets of a medieval castle? Well, today we're going on an epic quest to slice through the history of Swords Castle in Swords, Ireland. Swords Castle is a hidden gem filled with history and mystery just waiting to be discovered. Most of the locals drive by this amazing structure every day without giving it a second look. As we venture into its ancient walls, we'll uncover the secrets and stories that have been tucked away for centuries. This castle seems unassuming at first, but the more I dug into its history, the more I uncovered the deep dark secrets hidden behind the ancient stone walls. The history is quite literally buried in the grounds below the castle. There is a dark secret here you won't believe. Exploring Swords Castle is no easy feat. The challenge is to find the stories and piece them together. You see, before the 12th century, they didn't have the habit of writing things down. If you were a kid at that time, your father would tell you the stories, and eventually you would grow up, have kids, and tell them your version of those stories, so details would be forgotten, and the stories would change depending on who was telling them. Sadly, even what was recorded after the 12th century was lost during all the wars and destruction that came with the Normans in the 12th century. But fear not, with the help of a local guide and a lot of research, I have put together a glimpse into the history of this impressive castle. There is one secret hidden in this castle that will shock you, but first, we need to understand why this castle was even built. Unlike other castles, this was not built to defend a family and their lands. This castle was more of a commercial property. Think of it as a medieval shopping center with housing. Before we begin, let me get something out of the way. The area is called Swords, and although it sounds cool to think of medieval castles and swords, it has absolutely nothing to do with that. The town was founded in 560 AD, around a well, associated with St. Colmcille, which had very pure water. Now, Sword, in Gaelic means pure. The old town of Sword was west of the Ward River, and the new town of Sword grew to the east. So, there were two Swords. The British are to blame for the confusion because they anglicised the name, and the area with two towns called Sword became known as Swords. Now back to the castle. John Cummin became Archbishop of Dublin in 1181 after Lawrence O'Toole, and he chose Swords as his residence and built his manor house at Swords. To make more money from his property, he then created a new town. His plan worked so well that Swords became one of Dublin's largest boroughs. He was so rich that he became known as the Golden Prebend. A prebend is like an administrator for the church. By the 14th century, the Archbishop was bringing in around £6 million in today's money. This meant that his manor had expanded, and by 1326, it was the size of a castle, with a kitchen, larder, bakehouse, dairy, stables, and a carpenter's workshop, not to mention the great hall, chapel, and gardens. Since it grew so much, and a wall was built around it, by the 15th century, it had become a castle. With his fortune, in the 14th century, he had his private army to defend the castle and keep the peace. Since the castle was mostly surrounded, and to one side there was the river, access had to be controlled, and in the early 12th century, a gatehouse was built. Legend has it that it was built after Constable William Gowrotte was murdered at the gate. To stabilize the current gatehouse to open to the public, they had to dig under it, and that is when they made several interesting discoveries. First, the original gatehouse was made of timber. This stone structure would have been built later, on top of the ruins of the original one. Second, they found a total of 17 men, women and children buried under it. If that was not enough, one of these women had been buried face down, and a token was found not far from her right hand. This was probably to humiliate her in death, since people were traditionally buried facing heaven. It was in the 14th century, when the War of the Roses was raging on in Britain, that the castle was fortified. You see, they were afraid the Irish would rebel against the English, so the curtain walls were built or raised, with defensive towers on the corners. Around 1450, the Constable's Tower was built. This is one of the parts of the castle that is still standing, and it was nicely restored. During the restoration, they even added defensive features to the tower, which were not there originally. The constable would keep the peace in the castle, and the first floor of the tower would be his home. The jail would have been on the bottom floor, and the armory would have been on the second floor. One very important piece of evidence of this is that there is no fireplace on that floor. I mean, you would not want to store your weapons and gunpowder next to an open fire. During the excavations that began in 2014, they found layers of artifacts such as pieces of pottery, tile, clay pipes, iron nails, a lead seal, and, most shockingly, a lot of bones. But more on that later. However, one of the more curious finds was a slate that was very unusual because it had musical notes inscribed on it. Currently, the Discovery program is analyzing it to try to figure out how old it is and what it means. Maybe it was just a medieval musician trying to immortalize his music. Before we talk about the chapel, there is another interesting discovery that has stumped archaeologists. It seems at some point in the late 1800s, Patrick Dunn, owner of the Dunn's Bakery, seems to have created a secret entrance in the curtain wall, which was directly behind his house. According to local law, the Cobbs, who owned Swords Castle at the time, were the ones who blocked up the illegal doorway. I guess we will never know what Mr. Dunn was using his secret entrance to the castle for, but I suspect it was not to deliver bread. Finally, we have the chapel, which you can see from the street as you approach the castle. This is a lovely chapel, although it is no longer officially a holy place, and it is rented out for events and even weddings. Some evidence suggests it was also built in the 14th century, based on a coin found during excavations. It was in ruins, but it has been beautifully restored, using native oak for the new roof. Now, my guide and historian told me that the most valuable part of this chapel was the tiled floor. It seems the tiles that are there now are replicas of the original 14th century tiles, which are now in the National Museum. Oh, and the roof was built using the same techniques as the original roof, and there is not one single nail or screw in it. It is all joinery and wood pegs. This castle stood through many wars, but the battles fought here were mostly political, such as the Parliament of Swords in 1641. The castle has a history of being occupied and unoccupied during its history, but even this is not well known, since there is very little left from its 800 years in existence. The castle was in ruins by 1583 when Sir Henry Sidney, Lord Deputy of Ireland, housed 40 Protestant families fleeing from persecution there. They somewhat restored some of the castle, and the bread oven we see next to the gatehouse is all that is left from that time. The castle was abandoned again after they left, and it was only in 1830 that the Cobb family bought the property to use for farming and orchards. There is a surviving apple tree in the yard from the 1890s. However, despite all this history being fascinating, you will not believe the most shocking fact I uncovered during my tours. Before there was a castle, it seems there had been a cemetery there. So, this castle was actually built over an old burial ground dated back to around 1000 AD. When the archaeologists started to excavate, they started to uncover burial stones and graves in the yard, some just 10 centimeters below the surface. The castle, and later the orchard, were built over the graveyard that ran from the chapel doors all the way to the back wall. It is believed the first to be buried here were monks from St. Columba's Church nearby. When the Normans invaded, they didn't care one bit, and maybe they built over the graveyard on purpose, to show their power. Now, during all the years this was an active castle, people were literally walking over the old graves. They probably never knew about it and lived all their lives in the castle, having no clue of what was literally under their feet. Can you imagine that? So, today, Swords Castle is a beautiful tourist attraction, taking visitors back to the medieval Ireland, but we can only imagine what went on in those walls. It is also used for events and concerts, while preserving a bit of Ireland's very rich past. Climbing up the narrow steps of the Constable's Tower, walking the curtain wall battlements, and admiring the restored chapel gave me a glimpse of what life must have been like back then. Although no major battles happened here, I am sure that there are many lost stories of love, happiness, sadness, suffering and heartbreak that are lost forever. Maybe if the stones could talk, but until we learn to extract these long-lost stories from the old walls, we are just left wondering what might have been. I hope you enjoyed this adventure. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you have visited Swords Castle, tell me about it and let me know if I missed anything. I would like to thank Neil from the Swords Tourist Information Office for the lovely tour and history lesson. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and clicking on that like button, it really helps the channel. If you have more time, I have another adventure for you to explore on the screen. You can also check out the playlist to see all my adventures. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.